Hello everyone, Merry Morning here, and today I have a different kind of video. I woke up this morning and I was watching a live video that Ravenflower and Ginny Love did last night, and they were talking about empaths and what it's like to be an empath. And I really enjoyed the video. And it inspired me to make my own, basically because I have tried to make a video about empaths several times now. I have recorded them, got them all ready, and then deleted them. And I'll tell you why. It's a very personal subject to me. I do talk to people about it a lot, either online or in person, but it's a sensitive topic for me because I really struggled with it for basically my entire life. So when I saw the video that Ravenflower and Ginny Love had done, I thought, well, I'm just going to give it one more try and see how it goes. And I don't want, to, get too involved in this video. That's part of the reason that I had to keep deleting them, is they just kind of went on and on and on and on. So I think I'm going to have to do several videos on empaths. So we'll start there. So first of all, I don't want to say that I'm any kind of expert on this. I'm just telling my personal experiences and my personal stories and how I have learned to adapt. So I'll start with how I sort of discovered the term empath or what it means. So back in, I suppose it was about 2010, I worked at a clothing store, and at this clothing store there was a woman that I don't want to label her in any way, but when people talk about narcissists or psychic vampires and all that sort of thing, that is what this person was. So first of all, I'll just say, at that time, I was completely unaware of what it meant to be an empath or what was happening. I just knew that I had these feelings and sort of this psychic ability, but I did not have a term for it or a label or anything like that. So I just knew, I called it my intuition, mother's intuition, ESP, whatever you want to call it. So what would happen was that I started working with this woman, and for some reason, when I come across, I'm going to call them vampires, when I come across a vampire at work, in a work situation, somehow we immediately have this connection. And, and there's lots of articles out there on the internet about empaths and narcissists and they're kind of soul linked. Basically, I think it's because we have lessons to teach each other, but that's another topic for another video. But basically, I was tuned into this woman. Now, normally that happens with family members, that happens with close friends. I will get tuned into somebody and I can read their emotions and know what they're feeling or whatever. Long distance, it happens all the time. So this started happening with this woman that I barely knew. I just started working with her and didn't know her life story, didn't know anything about her. All I knew is that I could kind of feel her. If she walked in the building, I knew exactly how she was feeling or thinking, just instinctively. This is why I say a psychic gift or an intuition, because we're not talking about sitting down and talking to the person and learning about how they're thinking and feeling. You're just feeling it. And you may not even know who it's coming from. That's another topic. But this time, I knew it was from this woman. Because I'd be at work and everything's great and everything's fantastic, and then she would enter the building and the whole atmosphere of the building would change. So I started doing some research online, thinking, am I going crazy? Why am I linked to this woman? You know, it certainly had happened with my husband, which makes sense. You know, like you get linked with your partner, that you can read their thoughts and emotions, you know, easily. But, you know, to have this happen with a stranger, I thought, what is going on here? So I started doing research into figuring out, you know, why this might be happening. And I came across the term empath. And there's lots of articles out there on, you know, how to figure out if you're an empath. There, you know, there's one going around fairly recently about 30 things, you know, 30 things to know if you're an empath or something like that. And yeah, I can answer yes to everything on those lists, but I had never heard of that term before. I'd never heard of empath. And basically, back in 2010, when I started looking, it was all negative stuff that I found about how empaths are, you know, suffer from depression or anxiety, are recluse. You know, you hear about those people that turn into agoraphobics, like that. That's basically what these articles were saying, was that that's where an empath ends up leading to. And at first when I read that, I thought, oh, well, that doesn't sound good at all. And that doesn't sound like me, because I'm pretty extroverted. Many of my friends would tell you that. So that doesn't sound like me at all. Other than, you know, I might go through depression every once in a while, but it's not something that sticks around for me. It's usually caused by a major life event, and then I have to go through and struggle and regrow, you know, and learn from that life event. It's not like I'm, you know, have this clinical type of depression or anxiety or anything like that. So, you know, reading this articles, you know, I basically was like, oh, I'm not sure I like that. And then the more I read into it, then I found the term clairsentient. So this is where we start getting into where they talk about psychic gifts. So, you know, all the clairs, clairsentience, clairvoyant, clairaudient. All of those are psychic gifts, and people that are mediums or whatever, this is how they use their gift, and everybody's individual. So the more I read about that and stopped reading the psychology articles about empaths or highly sensitive people or any of that, the science-based ones were the ones that were scary. So when I stopped reading those and I started reading the ones that were geared more towards, you know, clairsentience being a psychic gift, it started to make sense to me. Because I had had this gift my entire life. I remember going to a hospital when I was very young. My father was sick, and we went to the Veterans Hospital. And, you know, walking into that building, I just knew that I didn't like it there. It felt terrible. Didn't want to be there. And I didn't, you know, we're talking like I was maybe 5 or 6. And I didn't understand why. And I remember kind of like, you know, grabbing onto his legs and like holding on to my father, trying to survive this Veterans Hospital. So this is something that's been around forever for me. I've just recently, since 2010, been able to label it or put, you know, an idea, concept around it. So it's not like the gift is new at all. No, I've been this way my entire life. But I just didn't know what what you called it. So even though this woman, I struggled with her, I think I stayed at that job for a good 1.5 years or so, until it basically became unbearable. Now, she was clinically diagnosed, just so we're clear, like she actually did have a problem, and I'm not making this up. She was clinically diagnosed as bipolar and clinical depression. So she actually did have major, issues that she was going through. And me being an empath, all I can tell you is what it was like to work with somebody that does have, major life issues or a mental disorder. It's like riding a roller coaster of emotions, and they're not your emotions. So every time, I'd walk in the door, let's say she was angry that day. Well, then everybody was angry that day. It's not like I'm special being an empath or clairsentient. I'm just aware of what it is. Lots of people have this gift, or they may not even realize that they're doing it. So if she was angry that day, then the whole building was angry. If she was depressed or sad that day, everybody felt that way. Like this lady just happened to be very strong in that the emotions that she felt, she was able to pass on to others, or others took it on. Whatever it was strong enough that I took notice for the first time in my life and kind of like started looking into it to figure out what is this and why is it happening. So even just kind of putting a label on it, yes, that started me on the road to helping myself, but just discovering what it was did not solve the problem. Because when you're an unaware empath, all you can do is just ride those emotions. And that's what's happening. Like you'd go in and you'd be great before you got to work, and then, you go in and this lady's all angry, and the next thing you know, you're angry and you're taking it on, and, lashing out at people, or maybe she was sad that day, so then I'm just bawling. Meanwhile, she's holding it together. She looks like normal, and I'm over here, all upset and bawling and, can't control all the emotions that are flowing through me, even though they weren't mine. So, another thing that I should explain, without trying to get too off topic, is the relationship between, say, a narcissist and an empath. And part of the reason we get linked is that they instinctively know, they may not be aware of it, but they instinctively know that an empath can help them. And what's under the surface of somebody that is a narcissist and maybe does some, not so nice things to people or causes issues and problems at a workspace, underneath the surface is somebody that's in pain. Somebody that has low self-esteem or, major issues. And they instinctively know that an empath can help them with that. And then the empath instinctively knows that what you see on the surface is not what's real. So even though this person might be lashing out and, causing havoc, you can see the real person underneath, and you still feel like you need to help them. So that's why a lot of empaths end up in abusive relationships, because you keep thinking, but I see who they really are underneath, and I want to help them, and, and then you keep sticking around until it gets too much. So it got to be too much about 1.5 years later. That job was pretty much a roller coaster of ups and downs and craziness sideways. until I decided, you know what, for my own sanity, I need to stop this. So I left that job and ended up doing something that I really enjoyed for a long time. Now, I'm not saying that I haven't come across this situation again, but now that I'm aware of what I'm doing, what I'm taking on, what I'm feeling, I'm able to control it. So maybe I can put that into the next video, but just for you empaths out there, you know, some of the things that Jenny Love mentioned in her video about, you know, hating to go to grocery stores and that kind of stuff, I still struggle with that. You know, and I'll use little tips to be able to make it through going to, you know, big box stores or grocery stores or that kind of thing. Not that I'm not, you know, I don't enjoy going out in a crowd, but there are certain places that have a bad vibration to them, or a negative vibration. And one of those is, you know, a grocery store, let's say the mall, big box stores. And the funny thing is, I've worked for years and years and years in retail, in a mall, or at, you know, a big box store. I even did that for a bit. How I survived, I don't know. I really don't know. I think I just got really good at shielding while I was at work. But, yeah, when you go into these places, you're going to take on the emotions. But now that I'm aware, I realized that I kind of say to myself, okay, how did I feel before I walked into the building? And you leave feeling, you know, that with a feeling of anxiety, or, you know, maybe somebody was angry there, maybe the energy of the building itself, there's a bad energy there, and you take it with you. But as soon as I sort of realize that it's not mine, I can let it go. It's like it flows through. It's, and you have to work hard to do this. I'm not saying that you can just do it automatically once you've figured out that you're an empath. This is the next step, is to be able to figure out what's yours and what's not yours. And what's not yours needs to flow through you. So you'll never be able to turn it off. I'm sorry. You know, there's probably people out there that do not want to hear that, but you cannot turn it off, but you can just let it flow through you. Like, oh, okay, that person's not feeling well today. That person's sad today. That person is angry today. Feel it. Maybe, you know, if it's somebody that you know, ask them how they are. But, you know, don't say, hey, I notice you're angry today, so, yeah, what's going on? I don't do that. I just ask them, how are you? That's all. And usually they'll tell you. And once they tell you, it will release off of them. You can let it just flow through you and back out into the universe and let it go. And once I sort of figured that out, life has changed dramatically. I used to spend, and I'm sure the other empaths will know what this was like. I would go to work, and then I would come home, and I would spend hours sitting there thinking about other people and worrying about other people. Worrying about how they felt, how their life was going. You know, maybe this person had their grandmother pass away that day. Maybe another person, you know, wasn't, you know, they're fighting with their spouse, or, you know, maybe they had money issues, any of that. I, as an empath, would go home. This is before I was aware. I would go home and I would sit there and think about it. And, you know, wish, you know, oh, I wish I could help that person. You know, I wonder what I could do. I wonder what, you know, this and this, and, you know, and I'd send them messages. How are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you got to let that go. If you're an empath, that right there is really toxic. That's all I can say is, well, What happens at work needs to stay at work. So and it's impossible to go home and not think about these people, but I would suggest that you not sit there and worry about them. So the minute that you start doing that, try and train yourself to start thinking, okay, what's going on in my life? What do I need to worry about? Maybe I need to work on my own business. Maybe I need to, work on my finances. Maybe I need to work on, my relationship. Instead of worrying about what they're doing, turn it back on yourself. Because often, when you get out there and you see things like that, it's a little bit of a clue that something back home needs to be looked at or worked at. And that's why you're seeing it out of yourself in other people. So it's like they're mirroring back to you. So once I changed that thought process and stopped constantly worrying about other people, which was difficult, so that's just how I am. And I don't mean about how other people think about you. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about going home and worrying about your friends or your coworkers or whatever, and whatever situation they're going through. That is not healthy. That's not good. So if you can work on changing that, that's the first step to changing your own world and not taking on so much of the energy that you don't want. So, yeah, first of all, do your shielding. Maybe I can talk about that in a different video about what I do to shield. There's crystals to use, like black tourmaline, black onyx. Like, use the crystals and carry them. I have a protection amulet that I wear. I have, I want to call it a mojo bag, but that's not really what it is, but a little bag with, a protection spell that I've done, and I carry that as well. And another trick is when you're out in public and you get overwhelmed. Let's say you're at a mall and you start to feel overwhelmed by all the emotions of everybody. Let's say you're at work, you start to feel overwhelmed. Go to the washroom. Go to the washroom, let the water flow in the faucet for a bit, sit there, relax, and let all that bad feeling and all that toxicity and all of that just flow out. Flush it down the toilet. Wash your hands. I'm old-fashioned, so I have kind of this tick where I do this 3 times. If I had a bad customer, at the store, and I knew that they were angry with me because, let's say, I wouldn't return something for them because it was against the policy or whatever, and they got angry, and of course, you're standing there as an empath feeling that, right? I immediately would do this. After they walked away, and I just let it go. That's another thing I learned later on. Now, maybe that's just a superstitious thing I picked up from my mother. I don't know, but it helps me anyways. It's kind of like, okay, I'm done with you, and just let it go. Let it flow out. So, hopefully, I think that's all I'm going to say in this one. Otherwise, I end up with a giant rambling video, which is why I kept having to delete them. So I'll stop there and maybe start doing a few videos about empaths and how to deal with it, and empaths in the workplace and that kind of thing. So I hope you got something from this. And thank you to Ravenflower and Ginny for sort of inspiring me to give it another go and see how this one went. So if you like this video, like and subscribe. Thanks, and blessed be.